And right on cue, our chair arrived.
There we go.
I broke the ice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Roll call. Lorraine Koss.
Maybe.
Here.
Charles Venuto.
Here.
John Byron.
Yo.
Vinnie Taranto.
Here.
John Windsor.
Here.
Terry Casto.
Here.
David Lane.
Here.
Karen McLaughlin.
Here.
Stephanie Ely.
Here.
John Durkee.
Here.
Courtney Barker. Todd Swingle. Jean Artusa and Danielle Bowden have asked to be excused. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I will entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'll also entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Virginia.
Okay, good morning. So this month, the major accomplishment is the county adoption, unanimous adoption of the septic ordinance countywide. And we'll talk about that more later on the agenda. Grand Canal muck dredging, the board approved moving forward with advertising the bid for that project. Post-Irma Turkey Creek dredging, we've submitted all the documentation for FEMA reimbursement, 87.5%. On the muck dredging master permit, we continue to move forward with seagrass and bathymetric surveys. Those are complete in Titusville and O'Galley and Rockledge, so lots of data there to go into project design and permitting. The Kingsmill Aurora Stormwater Project, which is one of the biggest county stormwater projects in the plan, requires a acquisition of a parcel that's valued at $835,000, and so that is moving forward through land acquisition. When are you going to present your thermometer?
Ready.
Oh, okay. Yes, please. So we, on our dashboard, we've had a row of numbers by the numbers, and then we've had our thermometers, and we realized that if we kind of switched the thermometers around and made them double-sided, that they could represent the stuff that was in the thermometers, the information that was in the thermometers, as well as the information in the numbers across the top. Brandon?
Yeah, seem to be losing our graphic.
There we go.
All right. Much better. So we added on to the money collected thermometer. We also added a column on the right for spent in that first thermometer there. And then we have, in the second thermometer, we are tracking the number of projects. So we have the number that are ongoing and then the number finished. And then we combined the total nitrogen, total phosphorus into one thermometer, so it tracks on either side of that. That's cool. So got a little more data in there.
So as far as work underway this month, just highlighting a few things. We're going to talk to you more about how the work that was done in support of the septic ordinance is also going to support updating of the plan. We have been talking with the Department of Health about setting up research here in Brevard County for innovative septic denitrification drain fields. The state doesn't have a research center, and so that's been holding them back in terms of where they could test systems. And obviously, we have a lot of needs, so we've been jumping up and down, and they now want to enter a memorandum of agreement with us to partner on testing systems here. So hopefully that will answer some of the needs that we have here, as well as provide answers for the rest of the state. The PFAS and PFOA contamination issues, we have collected muck samples and water samples from the lagoon, both the Indian River and the Banana River, sent those to certified labs for workup, and we've collected shallow groundwater samples from the mainland, south and central mainland. We've still got Titusville to go. We've still got irrigation wells in Cocoa Beach and South Patrick Shores to collect in the next week or two. So hopefully that data, the results from the labs will start coming back in next week. For muck dredging, Walker, do you want to hop up and talk about your O'Galley field visit? Sorry, I didn't give you a heads up, but.
Where's the guy on here? I don't know, we just jumped.
Good morning.
So we have what is in the Save Our Lagoon plan, Table 66, I believe, in the 2018 update. You'll see there is a project labeled the O'Galley project under muck removal. That entails, it's somewhat of an add-on to the St. John's River Water Management District O'Galley River project, where they have been dredging up in the tributary to remove muck. We have investigated the area outside of the O'Galley River mouth, and we're looking at some areas to the south of the O'Galley Causeway as well as the north side of the O'Galley Causeway, but it all focuses west of the Intercoastal Waterway. So a couple weeks ago we submitted our permit applications to the Army Corps and the DEP, and somewhat to our surprise we got an email from the DEP just earlier this week that said they're ready to issue the permit. So it's been less than 30 days, and it looks like we're going to get state authorization relatively quickly. I don't have an update on timing for the federal permit, but that's where we're at with the O'Galley project. So on the regulatory side, it's moved through very quickly on the state side. So just wanted to give you an update there.
Real quick, what do we have for deposition there in those areas west of the ICW?
So when you say in terms of quantities,
Yeah.
it's on the order of 475,000 cubic yards. It's a decent sized area. There's a couple borrow areas, relic borrow areas on the north and south side of the O'Galley Causeway there, where they use the material to actually build the causeway itself. So there's a significant amount of muck there, but there's also a decent amount of muck on the order of 2 to 3 feet thick in a few of the sections that we've investigated. There's some areas where there's a foot or less, but there's some other areas where there's a couple feet.
It's not pooled up anywhere. It's just covering the bottom of the lagoon.
Yes, it's a pretty. It is. I mean, it's pooled up, so to speak, in the borrow areas. So there's some 6 to 8 foot thick deposits there, but there's also some areas where there's 2 to 3 feet, and it covers a very significant portion of the bottom in the areas that we investigated.
And we have to turn in seagrass surveys, other environmental survey work, but
Yep.
then DEP sends staff out to verify.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yes, we did that last week. We took DEP staff to go out and investigate these areas and look for seagrass. There was really no seagrass to speak of in and around our proposed project area. So we're in good shape there. It was also a blessing. I don't know if anybody knows, the water is really clear in the lagoon down south right now. When we were around the O'Galley Causeway, we could see the bottom in 6 to 7 feet of water. So
Really?
that was helpful in our investigation. So.
Do you have an idea of the acreage we're talking about? The
Oh, I
land
knew you were
area?
going to ask that question. I want to say it's on the order of 300 acres. It's a significant footprint. Yeah, it's a good size area, and Florida Tech.
That's half a square mile.
Yeah, Florida Tech has gone out and investigated the area. They indicated that this is there's a lot of muck covering this particular area, so.
So when do you think this will start? Like, just ballpark?
You mean construction?
Yeah.
Oh, that's, it's all contingent upon when we get our federal authorization. The state has pretty good time clocks in terms of turning things around. I think for this particular project area, I'm cautiously optimistic because one of the big hangups, aside from seagrass, that we have in permitting these types of projects is manatees.
Right.
FWC apparently did not have significant concerns in this area because it's open water, so it's not a heavily traversed area for manatees. So I'm hoping that's a similar response we'll see on the federal side, where U.S. Fish and Wildlife will kind of follow FWC's lead on this one. So I really don't know what a good turnaround would be in terms of actually going to construction. I would imagine best case scenario, we're at least 9 months out.
Okay.
DMMA? Talk about the DMMA.
The BV52? What portion of it?
Just, that's the plan.
Oh, yes, and we're proposing, sorry, we are planning to use the same DMMA that was used for the Turkey Creek project.
Okay.
I don't know how familiar you are with that. That was funded through the state grant where we dredged Turkey Creek, and we used the fine DMMA, it's called BV52. It is about, a mile north of Palm Bay Road, the Palm Bay Road US 1 intersection on the west side of US 1.
Yeah.
In terms of traditional DMMA sites, it's a relatively small site on the order of 25 acres or so. But that is the site that we are proposing to pump the material to.
Okay.
And then ultimately, the material's got to come out and be disposed of permanently.
Right.
So,
Yes.
If I could, since we're talking muck and dredging right now, there's a concern that I have, I think we have, that doesn't necessarily have to be answered right now, but it's something we will need a clean answer on. The cost of getting a pound of nitrogen out dredging will go from $400 a pound to $1,600 a pound if the estimates we saw last month hold. And I think we need to understand, that's got gigantic implications for funding and Lagoon plan. And so we'll need to understand clearly how this is being dealt with in the Lagoon plan projected out and so on. And last meeting I asked if we had a competitive marketplace, and your answer and Matt's answer was yes, we certainly do. So it looks like these are real numbers, and we would like to hear, if not now, at a future meeting when we're dealing with this aspect of the Lagoon project plan for next year, how the heck we're going to deal with the fourfold increase in the cost of dredging.
Do you want to talk about that and how we're...
What, Virginia?
so the cost of each project is very similar to what was originally laid out in the plan. The difference is the benefit. So we're getting as much volume out, but that volume is concentrated in a smaller footprint.
Right.
And so that smaller footprint is fluxing less nutrients into the lagoon than if that same volume was spread out over a larger, broader area.
So it's not changing the cost of the project, it's the way we calculate it in the plan that's making
The
it work
way
that
we calculate the benefits.
That's right.
And so this ceases to be a big hurdle if you understand it.
Correct.
All right, now I understand it, thank you.
I was having a heart attack.
No, we clarified that, John, we clarified that at the last meeting, and it was a volume versus area.
I need my hand held.
That's okay.
Walker, what about the timeline? Where are we on the timeline? I mean, we've had a lot of hurdles. So in terms of the original plan, and how backed up are we in terms of muck removal?
So muck removal projects, I think probably kind of an overview of how these projects play out. And I think the handout that we have that has I think Brandon prepared, it's kind of a flow chart, gives you an idea of how these projects, the timeline on these projects. I think when you see a project in year two and it says, $8 million for a muck removal project, there is, there's the design and permitting component of it, which typically takes, 6 months to a year, maybe even longer, depending on some of the nuances and components. And then the production rates of the actual contractor once hired are another thing that can push these projects out, and they can take years, depending on, again, the challenges and hurdles and the capability of the contractor to move material. So I don't, in terms of the project timeline, there are some projects that are a little bit behind schedule. I don't know if we have
Yeah, so
a big-
Sykes and Grand
Right.
are late getting started compared to what we had proposed in the plan, but we've worked hard to move on the permitting on a bunch of the other projects coming up, and that's moving along. And so
Okay.
Yep.
I think, we'll make up the lost time.
Okay.
There's just big projects that are slow to get started.
And again, being cautiously optimistic, I think the DEP's response to our O'Galley permit was very promising. I think once they get a better level of comfort with us doing these projects and doing them well, that will also give them, the comfort level of, okay, well, we don't have to scrutinize their every move. I mean, they have a regulatory responsibility, but I'd like to think that it's a promising response from the DEP at this point.
Yeah.
So,
Walker?
Yes, sir.
And I agree with you at the state level. I mean, they've been down here, we've had communication with them. The problem is we need federal permitting, and that always seems to be the thing that slows us down. A year ago or so, we worked with some consultants about doing a bulk permit for the entire area. Well, I think I see it in here, but can somebody address that, where our status is?
Yeah, so that you're referring to the programmatic permit. So that effort was led by one of our consultants, Tetra Tech, and we compiled a team of, very highly qualified folks that have dealt with the regulatory agencies on the federal level. We are at the last leg of finalizing the work that they had done and applying for a programmatic permit on the federal level. I don't. So we're moving forward with that. I think we've got some. Our reviewer at the Army Corps has been very supportive proponent of what we're doing here. He's a local guy, and he's been very helpful in helping us navigate the federal process. So at this point we're still finalizing the programmatic permitting. And I think we're in pretty good shape. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Virginia?
Well, so it's the federal coordination with the other NEPA, the other federal agencies, that's the hurdle. And so, we've worked our way through the National Marine Fisheries issues. We're still trying to work through the manatee issues. And so we're trying to work with the local Corps staff to figure out exactly what they think they need to push for faster response from Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Thanks.
Have we reached out to Debbie Mayfield or any of the other federal representatives?
So not at this point. We still want to provide some of the commenting agencies that we've engaged with responses to questions they've asked. I think it maybe be a little bit premature to we need to give them an opportunity to.
I understand.
We got to provide them a response and
We have met with Congressman Posey, and he's been very helpful. I met with Helen Miller from Senator Nelson's office 2 weeks ago. They're absolutely willing to help, but we need the paperwork on the Fish and Wildlife desk before we have that political push to process the paper.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Didn't Commissioner Smith go and try to get them to do some fast tracking on some of this stuff?
He's talked to,
Okay.
yes, a number of people, yes.
Yeah, because sometimes with Fish and Wildlife, I don't even wait for the staff anymore. I just go straight to Senator Mayfield. It just, sometimes you have to do that.
Terry?
Walker, I thought DMMA for O'Galley River was going to be over there east of the reclamation area on Sarno Road. It's been moved now. We're going to use a different area.
So,
And just while you're thinking about that, I did muck surveying in the O'Galley River. There are a lot of feeder canals there that are just choked. Is this permit going to allow us to get at the muck that's in those small feeder canals?
so we are not pursuing any work in the O'Galley River tributary. St. John's is handling that. That's the active dredging that they have going on there at this point. All of our O'Galley work focuses out in the open water of the lagoon. In terms of the spoil site that is over on the solid waste property that's over there next to the landfill on Sarno Road, it's my understanding that they are behind schedule there. And Virginia, you could probably talk about it a little bit better than I could, but solid waste has a timeline that they want to follow, and they have some infrastructure plans of their own, which requires that site to be.
That's tied to the St. John's
Yes,
project.
so St. John's is basically going to fill up the available space there for final repository of muck, and so we needed to find an alternate site. So we've been arranging with Florida Inland Navigation District to go back to BV 52. They're going to make some repairs to, some upgrades to BV 52 now that we're done with the Turkey Creek project. And as soon as they're done with that, hopefully we'll be ready to roll forward with the O'Galley project.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Walker, excuse me, before
sir.
you leave, can you give us a quick update on MIMS? I know we've been watching that every month, and it's almost November, and it's been a year with the hurricanes, and
Yes, so we are in negotiations with the contractor at this point to attempt to get the dredging completed by December 31st. That's what we're trying to do. That's the dredging work. That's not the all of the upland removal, disposal, restoration stuff. So we're in the middle of negotiations with the contractor at this point.
And are they hitting the target numbers that we had asked for on outflow nutrient in the waters? I know we had in August, they had to get a new permit.
They have struggled to hit those targets. There has been some reduction, but they have struggled to hit the effluent treatment targets that are in the construction contract.
Okay. And we're paying for that based on performance, so we're not going to pay for it, but I'd rather pay for it and have it work.
That's correct. It's pay for performance, and so that's how the contract is structured.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just two more things to highlight on the progress report. The UCF research team has been out and done their initial monitoring of the installation of the Bomalaski oyster reef and two of the shoreline planting projects. And so they're working on reports of how that initial installation is going, and then they're going to do 3-month, 6-month, and 1-year monitoring to show how the survival and growth of those projects continues.
And Virginia, to point out, that was not the plan that we approved, that I asked for third-party verification from. We already know what they did, which was put in live oysters works. So I don't know why we're spending money on third-party verification on a program that works. It was the new idea of throwing spat that is what concerned me and that I wanted verification on. So, I mean, we don't need to be going out there every 3 months to look at oysters grow and pay for it.
We contracted with UCF to monitor 6 or 8 oyster reefs and the 2 living shoreline projects. We negotiated that before we knew whether we were going to be using spat or gardened oysters. And so, we contracted with them to do this whole season of projects. And so that's, one in the mix.
There's a whole group of projects on here for the zoo, and this appears to be, and I could be missing one, but this appears to be the only one that they've done, completed so far.
Correct. They're waiting for permits on the others.
We have a quarterly payment to them, irrelevant of whether they complete these or not. Will the county hold that up in some way? Because, I mean, they have a whole list of things here. They've done 100 feet, and we're paying out $150,000 a quarter,
The 100,
right?
the 150,000 that's paid quarterly is for the oyster gardening, or
Right.
the oyster gardening contract.
Yeah.
The build the actual reefs money, that's Lagoon, Save Our Indian River Lagoon money, that's paid when they build the site.
Right.
Okay, so I have two different contracts, and I miss, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right, so we've finished one fiscal year, moving into the next fiscal year, so Crystal's been really busy on fiscal year closeout and opening new purchase orders for the new year. In terms of meetings this month, the intergovernmental coordination meeting was held on September 27th. We'll talk about that a little later. And the Florida TechCon, we had a good showing there, a lot of presentations by staff. It was a nice event. I just want to highlight that Keep Brevard Beautiful continues to look for volunteers for fish kill response. You know, we started this, we put this on the agenda after the fish kill in the Indian River Lagoon. We now, with the red tide, may need their services on the beach. And so if anybody is interested in volunteering with Keep Brevard Beautiful.
Virginia, is that listed on our volunteer opportunities?
Yes.
It is, okay.
Yes. And then I talked to Bob Musser at Port Canaveral earlier this week about the Dr. Zerillo's circulation enhancement project, and that is going forward to the next Port Commission meeting, so we should be able to bring that presentation to you at the November meeting. I need to reach out to Dr. Zerillo and confirm the date. Is there anything you want to say about, are there any questions about the performance table, the green table?
Virginia, one thing we were looking at, so obviously the table's growing, and it's going to keep growing throughout the years. I didn't know if there was a way that we could classify a project with a project number. I don't know how to do that. I mean, I do know how to do that, but I'm certain there's somebody smarter that could do that. Give each project a number, and then down the road, 8 years, 9 years, we'd have a number you could look in and pull it up and see when it was added to the project or any other relevant information.
And we have, each project gets a contract number in our system, and we could link those to that on the table, but it's not like anything you'd be able to easily reference in the way that we have them listed currently. So currently we list them by the entity alphabetical, so starting with Brevard County down to West Melbourne, and then we group each of them by the types. So we have our stormwater, muck removal, things like that, just to make it easy to find that way. So we could put numbers in with them, but they wouldn't necessarily be in any sort of consecutive order if we're using our contract numbers that are already assigned to it.
Yeah, I think the way that it's laid out is great. Obviously, the numbers are going to make more sense to a computer system or for a lookup system than it would for somebody reading them. So I like the way they're laid out, but I think if there was a way to have a number associated with it, let's say somebody got this document and then 3 years down the road they wanted to find that project, you know, they could look that project number up and see where it is. And maybe down the road on the website too, we built some sort of database where somebody can look up a project and see when it was started, how far along it was, and just more reporting. And I understand that the numbers are behind the scenes, so maybe if you put it somewhere, you know, under the entity or project type or somewhere, just the number in there.
Yeah, because in the original Excel file, I actually have the contract numbers, but they're just a hidden column.
Why are you hiding stuff from us, Brandon? Come on, man.
Because we have to fit it on one sheet.
No, I
Yeah.
understand.
And
I
any more
understand.
columns I add on, then we have to reformat for the ADA compliance and
I don't
things.
think, I wouldn't add another column, and I would just try to find a way to put the number under the title or something in there.
Tuck it under the nominated.
Make it really small.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
Brent.
can't. We have, it has to be 12-point font.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
This is really easy to read as it is. Now, 10 years from today or 6 years from today, as projects are completed, his point makes sense. I don't think we need it on paper, but if there was a link, hidden link on the website where somebody then could go back and see the details, that would make sense. But as this is presented each month, it's extremely easy to read, and I appreciate the effort, you guys.
And when we work in the map that will have the projects, we're planning to put information in there so that can have the contract number in that story map as well.
And this is Oh, yes.
If the contract number looks like what I'm thinking a contract number looks like, it's going to be a big number. Aren't we using an index number? When we've gone through project reviews the last couple of years, and you brought forward, 50 projects, we've got an individual 3-4-digit index number.
So,
Some
they
of
have
which-
a 1 to 2 digit index number currently. We'll get to 3 digits eventually, but the contract number is just that number starting with whatever year of that contract. So it would be 17 or 18 and then that index number. And
Okay,
that's,
if that works, fine. I'm after, and I think Vinnie is too, something that allows us to get from a summary report like this back to what was the original submission, and with all that information that went into the original approval. That's all. Thanks.
Yes.
yeah, and we use the same names that were in that original approval. We pull those off of their applications, and that's the names we use. So you can reference back that way as well.
I just want to comment that this performance table is an extraordinary asset, resource for anyone who wants to understand the breadth and the depth of how the trust fund money is being actually spent, and what the 140-page Lagoon plan looks like in real time on a short number of pages. And so commendation to Virginia for making Brandon do this, and thank you for doing a really great job.
Thank you.
On the revenue side, we just topped $70 million, so the dollars continue to come in slightly ahead of our revenue projections. I think that's it for my report.
Thank you so much. We are going to move into other reports and special presentations. And after the last meeting, we do have a time limit on presentations. And so we are going to be instituting that this morning and asking our presenters to stay within that time limit. So,
So your first presentation on the agenda, due to the hurricane, the governor is restricting travel to only emergency-related travel, and so our presenters were not able to make it. Also, at the last meeting, we had deferred the stormwater presentation from Jeff Rapolti. He was not able to be with us this morning, so we will bring that back to you at a later date. So who we do have for you this morning is Stephanie Delano, who's the finance manager for the Office of Tourism Development, to talk to you about their new grant program.
thank you. She hasn't started yet.
Good morning. Okay, Virginia asked me to come and just give you guys a brief overview of our recent implementation for and change in the ordinance that would allow tourist development tax to be spent on the lagoon. When that was done, there was an ordinance change, and it was unanimously voted in by the board. And so for fiscal year 18-19, we're beginning that program. And it allowed for $1 million of tourist development tax within the beach funds to be used for projects related to the lagoon. 10% of that will be used as a communication plan. And so there's $900,000 left. There's projects allowed of $50,000 or below, and they do not need matching grant funds. And there's also projects for over $50,000 that would be subject to a 3-to-1 match of non-county funds. There's also a limit on the projects for $50,000 and below of $250,000 spent within that $900,000 that is available. So this program was brought forward through our beach committee and our tourist development council, and they wanted to be able to show the tourist that they are visiting a local community who is willing to step up and take care of their natural resources and assets. And so it provides an opportunity for the effective projects over $50,000 to extend the reach of the program through matching funds, and provides an opportunity for impactful projects of $50,000 or less to also receive funding easily. So we have created on our website through the county, we have on the Tourist Development Council homepage, there is a tourism blog button. So I'm going to take you to that now. And that's how we're going to communicate our efforts, the projects, and any other useful information that will be helpful to the lagoon, as well as its impact and correlation with tourism. So if you go to the county site and go to the tourist development page, then you have what's the tourism blog here. And we've called that Tourism Plus Community. It's an outlet where we can get information out there that provides positive information as well as facts to items and issues that are going on throughout the county within tourism's realm. And so if you go down, as you can see, we have a red tide article section there. But if we go down, there's the Tourism and Lagoon Grant Program. So people that want to submit or apply to get one of these grants would go here, and they would click, and there's information regarding the program, some of the actual 4 different types of projects that will be considered that they can apply for funding for. And there's also a click where they can get to the online grant application as well as the guidelines. So it's very simple to use. And we're really excited about the program. Excuse me. We were trying to make sure that we got it out quickly. So there are some hard deadlines for this year, but we do plan to look and see if there's ways that we can improve the program moving forward. So this is our first trial year. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Is the Lagoon Trust Fund paid for the sales tax a source of matching funds? Question for you and for you.
Well, we've had that question quite a bit, and so local cities can match, and any state and federal, but in terms of, it can't be the same project. I think that's the key.
Where's that come?
There.
Where's the prohibition come from? We have living shoreline money. You have funds that can be applied to living shoreline through a grant application. If it's above $50K, you're seeking matching funds.
Correct.
Binary question that somebody needs to answer.
Right.
Yeah, the answer is no,
Why?
as the match. That is what the board adopted. That was recommended by the Tourist Development Council.
And that's their decision.
It was the recommendation of the Tourist Development Council that was approved by the County Commission.
Thank you.
And the reason for
No,
that.
I'm fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Stacey, you had started your presentation about communicating this to the tourist. And could you elaborate a little bit more on that? I mean, is that something you're going to do with like partners with hotels, and they can tell guests, what's going on as far as the lagoon or?
So we do plan on pushing that out through this channel, as well as any other channels that we have on social media that would be available for that. We've through Facebook, Instagram, different levels of that. I do have with me who we're using for our communications plan, and Beth, if you'd like to. She's in the audience there, but we are working with right now to develop those detailed plans within the communications. And we'll be working closely with Virginia as well to get the information out there that needs to be heard.
Because I'm thinking, still a lot of population will not use the blog or go to social media. And, when you go to a hotel, they usually like to talk about their green programs, about, the towels and the water usage, et cetera.
Right.
So it seems like that might fit into that type of communication device.
Absolutely. It absolutely would.
Courtney?
From what I understand with the communications, when we were in committee, the communication is about all of our restoration efforts, not just this particular plan, which I think that was very concerning for us because we wanted to make sure that we had, I think our biggest criticism is nobody knows what we're doing. So having that funding source to just push out to the community what we're doing was very important. So it's not just limited to this particular grant program. It's basically all of our restoration efforts across the county. And so that's what that money is supposed to be earmarked for.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yes, and we're working on those details now so that we make sure we get the right content out.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the metric that this group uses for all applications is the reduction of nitrogen into the lagoon. As I read your application, I guess the question is, what metric are you using to approve these project requests?
We are actually using our beach committee that will be grading these applications, and keep in mind that these are for different types of projects. So they are related in relation to tourism plus the lagoon. So it's a different type of project.
Okay, so what metric will the beach committee be using to determine whether this is actually contributing to improving the lagoon?
We're actually developing a plan, and we're working with the Florida Inland Navigation District to develop that plan that will navigate how the projects fit into what our end goal is.
Let me try. They have evaluation.
I got their form.
They have evaluation criteria that were left out from your packet because they weren't ADA compliant, so we couldn't include them in your packet, but they are available online on the blog site that Stacey showed you.
Yeah, I can run over to it here.
Yeah, and if I might too, Beth Lemke, Planning Solutions, helping the TDC with the guidelines and the grants. So this year, this is our first year. This is a new grant, new program. Our priority was to get it out there really quick. We wanted to get the money out available. So we didn't get overly bogged down in the project specifications for this year. And by that I mean, we have a basic outline. We feel very comfortable with it as far as what's out there, to get the money out there, to get some applicants in, some good applications for good projects. This year it will probably be more subjective than in future years. We are simultaneously developing a plan to move forward, and we anticipate that that's also very fast-tracked, again, to try and get a handle on all this very quickly. So the plan will be developed that will help look at what the highest benefit projects would be, okay, and try and develop those at a conceptual level first, cost them, benefit, look at benefit analysis as part of that plan, and then that would help sort of tee up what are the priority projects that the communities can then bring forward, and nonprofits and other eligible applicants, but that can come forward, because oftentimes that's the hardest part, getting the project conceptualized, getting those upfront details. I work on a lot of grants as well, and, the construction funds, actually getting it done, it's kind of easier sometimes to pull, even though that money's bigger, to pull that together because you have more sources. It's really helping figure out what is the project, how do we do it, what's the timeline, what's the cost. So we're going to do a plan that will try to identify that. So, and then we'll look at more detail at your more specific criteria, nitrogen loads, phosphorus loads, all those things.
Yeah, and, it may be that you have, we have a Venn diagram where there's a lot of overlap between, our objectives, but maybe you'll have some different objectives and goals that, that you can focus on. So I think that's really positive to kind of look at this in many different levels.
This one is the tourism for sure is our specific aspect that is unique from any of the other programs. And I think any ideas you guys have on communication to be innovative, we'd love to hear. Because we want to be innovative and thoughtful in how we get the information out there, because that communication plan, the main purpose of that is to tell the good side of the story about all the great things that are being done, what we're doing as a community to protect our resources.
Right.
Are there any contracts right now for communications with this plan, or has that money not been spent at all yet?
It hasn't been spent yet.
So we are currently working on that communications
So
plan.
there's no communications at all right now?
Well, not currently, no. Yes, we actually have a plan later, we actually have a meeting, later today to work down some of those fine details, and we will be pushing out information. We do have the deadline for the grants as November 7th, and so that will probably kickstart our communications plan.
I have one more follow-up question. Is there, have any projects been submitted? Any applications, I mean?
There are some that have been submitted halfway. There is no complete
Could you speak
grant.
very briefly, without getting specific, of what those are? Are they?
We cannot see those as of yet, actually. Yeah, I do not have access to them.
I can tell you, because I got tasked with putting together the list of all the county projects that were being submitted, and so Parks and Rec has a number of projects, including wildlife viewing, observation boardwalks along the lagoon, Brazilian pepper busting along the shoreline. Matt Culver is putting in one for removal of derelict vessels and sunken debris from the lagoon. We're putting in a request for a feasibility study for a living shoreline fish reef break along the causeway in Titusville. We're submitting for a number of webcams that we could move from Lagoon project to Lagoon project to have a live view, live feed of projects under construction, and then, when that project's done, we'll move the webcam to the next project. And UF Extension Services is requesting funds to do stormwater pond education, and the Merritt Island Redevelopment Agency has got several requests to do cleanups and enhancements along the causeways, and working waterfront improvement access to the lagoon. So it gives you a feel for the kinds of projects being submitted.
If I could, I'd just like to praise the TDC council members for teeing this up and bringing it to fruition, the county commission for approving it as they have, staff for moving this thing forward. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And this sounds like a very, very good augment to what we do. We don't work in the area of tourism development. You do. You're the pros from Dover. Thank you and welcome aboard.
Well, thank you. We hope to be good partners with you all.
Thank you very much.
Chair, I just had one more.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that, when as this moves forward, that there's an understanding that there's not going to be an evaluation similar to what we have in our plan, because there's no nitrogen removal estimates for litter control, stuff like that. So we have to make sure that you're just cognizant of that. It's just a different emphasis and kind of world, I guess.
Yeah, I got that, and I appreciate it, and it's a different approach. Though what I just heard was a whole bunch of programs that are generally funded by general tax funds, match programs from the pulling boats out there, et cetera, and that all we're doing is shifting money that we're collecting from the taxes over to these programs because they're not funded enough through general taxes.
That's correct.
It seems like a complete shuffle of tax money. Let's just get more from the tourists and then move it over to do stuff that we should be doing, don't have the money to do.
I don't think we're getting more money.
No.
It's the money that's already being collected.
Well, what do you mean, no? I mean,
Is that a criticism, John, or?
It's just kind of an observation. That, I mean,
I have to agree with him.
Yeah, it's just an observation. We're taking money that wasn't available before, we keep getting it from the tourists, and we're using it for stuff that we should be taking care of ourselves.
This comes out of a pot of money called bed tax. It's 5% tax on tourism, and it's going back into something that the TDC thinks is useful to enhance tourism and fulfill their mission as mandated by the county commission. We're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're taking money from inside the bed tax and putting it to something that the TDC and the county commissions thinks is a worthy fund.
It's from the state, John. The TDC protested doing this kind of stuff. The state allows them to do it now so that the TDC and the board now agree to use the money for this. And they're allowed to do it now. They weren't allowed to do it prior to the legislation a year and a half ago.
We're probably in violent agreement.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
your time,
Thank you.
and we appreciate your efforts on behalf of the Lagoon. Virginia, septic.
Yes. So, yes. Thank you, Anthony. All right, so you'll get to exercise your clock. Be the first to test the system. And so John Windsor asked that we send out a clip of the presentation that we gave to the county commission with adoption of this ordinance, so I won't walk you through all of that. You've got it if you want it, but just some highlights. So, these are our sources of pollution and into the water column in the lagoon currently. And so, muck is the largest source of nitrogen and phosphorus in the water column right now, which is why it's such a big part of the plan. But the next highest column on that graph is septic. And if the muck is a legacy pollutant from decades of pollution. We know we've got to get that out, but we also have to put the lagoon on a steady diet. We have to stop putting too much pollution in. So if we take that legacy load, if we take that black bar out and then re-graph things, you'll see the importance of septic to the entire water quality of the lagoon. And one of the unique things about septic is we have been working for decades, in many cases, on the sources that contribute to each of these separate bars. And all of them have been going down. We have been reducing the amount of pollution from all of these sources, with the exception of two. Septic systems, which continues to go up because as more growth and development occurs here and more septic systems are going in, they're having a larger impact on the lagoon. And reclaimed water, which is, as we have more people here creating more waste and more wastewater, more reclaimed water, that becomes a larger source to the lagoon. So the Save Our Lagoon plan has retrofit funding to try to reduce the impact of septic systems on the lagoon, as well as, a lot of these bars and the reclaimed water. So moving on. So in terms of adopting an ordinance to try to stop the growth of pollution from septic systems, we wanted to limit that increase in pollution going forward, but we also wanted to minimize the area of impact on new development, the cost on homeowners and builders. And to do that, we needed a spatial analysis. So we contracted with Applied Ecology, Dr. Claudia Listipad, to analyze the potential for septic loading at different distances using a state-approved model. So step one was we had to map the edge of the shoreline, not just from the lagoon, but from canals and ditches throughout the county, and then set up these buffer areas at different widths, different distances from the lagoon. So the yellow there is 0 to 30 meter buffer. We actually did this in 10 meter slivers, but that was too hard to show in one graphic. So these are 30 meter widths, but you get the idea. And then we overlaid that with the septic locations, and so those septic dots are color-coded to match the slivers. Then we use the state-approved model for septic loading to determine, what is the loading from all of the septic systems within that sliver of distance away from an open water connection to the lagoon. Next slide. As soon as Applied Ecology got started doing this with our 60,000 septic systems, the model started blowing up and not functioning because it's not capable of handling more than about 2,000 septic systems at a time. And so they divided the county into 16 different work areas, and they subsampled the septic systems within each of those work areas to get an idea of what is driving septic pollution and where are those most important areas to regulate septic. So when we just initially graph the results from those 16 different work areas, across the bottom of this graph, the x-axis is distance from the water, and then up the y-axis is the percentage of the nitrogen load from the septic systems within each of those distance classes, and this is a cumulative loading graph. So if you look at the bottom curve, the bottom orange curve, you have to go out 125, 150 meters to capture 80% of the load from all septic systems in that work zone. Whereas those top curves, that go out 30 meters, you're capturing 90-something% of the loading. And so how do we write an ordinance that is feasible to implement countywide when you have this kind of variability? So we went into those curves, we went into those areas to try to understand what was driving the difference from one area to the next. And the biggest factor was not distance. The biggest factor is soils. And so if we mapped the soils within each of those 16 different work areas and just classified them by hydraulic conductance, you see a tremendous variation from one area to the next. Next slide. This is a sort of a visual representation. That brown area is a low conductivity soil. The tan soils are medium conductivity soils, and so you see those rainbow to blue colored nitrogen plumes extending long distances through the medium conductivity soils, and hardly any plumes at all emanating from the septic systems within the low conductivity soils. So the challenge was finding where are high conductivity soils, where are the lows, how can we set up something that makes sense from an ordinance perspective. Next slide. So we ended up grouping the county into 4 different zones with 4 different stories. And the yellow curve there at the top is the Melbourne-Tillman Water Control District, where there's a high concentration of these low conductivity soils. And so the majority of the loading there doesn't travel very far through the soils. And so the buffer width that you need to capture the majority of loading is a much narrower area, smaller area than elsewhere in the county. So in the end, what was recommended by staff and then recommended by the local planning agency and approved by the county commission with a unanimous vote was all of the barrier island, which is made up of extremely sandy, porous, high conductivity soils, all of Merritt Island, which is a mix of high conductivity soils and floodplain, where you don't want septic drain fields flooding frequently, a 40-meter buffer width within the Melbourne-Tillman Control District, and a 60-meter buffer width for the remainder of the mainland. So, sort of 2 success stories is we've done this analysis, and it resulted in a unanimous vote for increased regulation of septic systems and higher performance technology within this overlay zone. Septic systems, we still permit septic systems, the state will still permit septic systems, but they have to be those high performance systems that we visited at the FOA site, back a year ago when we were getting started on this. And so we will see a lot more of that new technology in the county with growth and development. Then the second part of the story, which I'm going to let Anthony tell, is that same analysis helps us to better refine the Lagoon plan going forward, which was built on a very simple understanding of distance only, not soils.
Yeah. So on page 38 in the Lagoon plan, you see this matrix that has nearly equal weight on a bunch of variables that affect how septic systems impact our waters. What the analysis from applied ecology showed us was that we had them weighted too equally. There were some variables, such as the soil type, that had a far larger influence on whether the septic was going to impact the local waterway, along with distance and the age. So what we have coming is an update to the septic system analysis that's going to help us prioritize the septic systems based on her analysis. So we'll have two lists of septic systems. This previous analysis, which was based off of work done by Martin County and some of the other communities locally, and then her analysis, which is based off the state model that measures impact of septic systems on local waterways. We're going to bring this information back to you all in the plan update, and in there you'll see a new prioritization of the worst septic systems. Hopefully we'll be capturing some of those septic systems that are on our A-type soils. So a lot of the septic systems that are on very sandy soils were missed in the previous iteration of the septic system, or of the septic analysis in the first plan. And then we'll also have her look at the subdivisions we are looking at for sewer to a septic to sewer project conversion, and see if it still agrees with this new analysis.
Just go back, just that top bullet. When we did the original plan, we were looking at strictly single-family residential subdivisions, and we've asked Dr. Listopad to also map multifamily condos and mobile homes. And in the field work that Anthony's been doing, we have a number of mobile home parks right on the water, so very old septic systems, high density, high conductivity soils that we just know intuitively that has to be a bad equation. So hopefully this will give us the science to prioritize those systems and fund upgrading or hooking them up to sewer, or some sort of improvement through the Lagoon plan.
Yeah, and it's more than intuitively. There's a bunch of studies from the karst locations of Florida where they have just deep sandy environments over a limestone bed, which is fairly similar to our ridge lines here. And they find that because the sand just lets water flow through so quickly, that's where the spring sheds are being impacted by the septic systems. So the science would seem to agree in some way with our ridge lines here. It just wasn't captured as well in our previous matrix.
Yes.
Comment. This is going to be extraordinarily valuable targeting as the Lagoon plan moves forward. It's an example of how we are designing this airplane as we fly it, and really good work. The ultimate fix for patches like, say, North Merritt Island, north of the Barge Canal, which is 100% septic, and all of it is subject either to leaching into the canal, into the river directly, or through flooding and overflow. The ultimate fix is a special taxing district that creates a sewer system up there.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably above our pay grade, but maybe not for future consideration in a future Lagoon plan to advocate that or to seek funds for that outside our trust fund. And I would just like to say publicly that that would be a very, very good thing for the leadership in the county, both staff side and county commission, to think about for the future. We can strike a marvelous large blow in favor of the Lagoon by getting all of North Merritt Island onto a modern, entirely regulation compliant sewer system.
I was literally going to say the exact same thing you just said.
Great minds move in concert.
Right? Because my concern with, and I understand the concern with the county on Burt Harris issues, but when we are constantly permitting more septic systems, at the same time we're trying to remove them, it makes no sense. And so I'm not real sure, you know, I do agree that the best way to handle this would be to create some way that sewer can be brought to that area. But on the other hand, you know, most cities in Brevard County don't allow any septic tanks. So, and I know that the county, the issue with the county is that Merritt Island is a different animal than the rest of the county. It's an urban area, and it's developing, and so we're keep approving new developments with septic tanks in an area that should not have septic tanks. In fact, some of those areas shouldn't be developed at all, and they're floodplains. So, you know, I don't know if we could, as a board or a committee, look at that and maybe come up with some possible solutions for the county commission to look at and pass that on to them. But it's like we're just fighting an uphill battle if we keep doing what we're doing. So I think this ordinance is great, and it's definitely, you know, put us ahead of things where we are from today. But we're not addressing the new septic tanks coming in areas that should not be there at all. And I think, you know, and we're not going to change the Burt Harris Act anytime soon. So, you know, we might want to look at a sewer option and figure out how we can help the county commission get that done.
Might I suggest that I don't think it's appropriate for the Lagoon plan update we're working right now. It's a pretty detailed document, and we're past the point to figure this out. But I think this would be a marvelous project for staff to present to us ideas about how this might be incorporated into the next year's Lagoon plan. And we'll have the opportunity to do some proselytizing and talking with the new round of county commissioners, et cetera. I think it'd be neat to know how many pounds of nitrogen would be kept from going into the lagoon if the area of Merritt Island north of Barge Canal were on a modern septic system now and projected growth.
Because Merritt Island's a city. It is. It's a city, and it's, you know, you're looking at an area that looks just like Melbourne, Titusville. You know, I mean, it's an urban area, and it's unincorporated, so it abides by the same laws that, you know, an area out in the middle of nowhere has, and it just doesn't make any sense. So that's my biggest concern is, you know, we have a city basically that's able to live like they're in the Wild West, you know. So we need to look at some options for that area.
I did take a look at Myra's footprint, the Merritt Island Redevelopment Agency, which might seem to be a logical entity to take this on. The footprint does not match at all.
Right.
It's spotty. It's built. If there's a gas station there, it's probably within. If there's not a gas station, it's probably not. So Myra is not the answer. This is a county issue, and my suspicion is that a well-formulated plan could probably suck in state and federal money as well, which is often how waste management projects roll forward.
Yeah.
All right.
Madam Chairman.
We have
still make
exceeded our
comments?
time, so I'll accept your last question. Go ahead.
Well, that was my question. Is it partially, we're out of time, but can we continue this conversation?
Point of order.
We did.
Point of order. The restriction is for the presentation to be 15 minutes in the bylaws. It is not for conversation by this board.
Thank you. Okay. So my criticisms prior to this were all that I would like something a lot stronger. I fully understand where we ended up. I want to thank Virginia staff and everybody that was involved for the detailed analysis that supports this new legislation. Will it have a huge impact in the future? The answer is no, because a lot of these areas are already grown out, and we're still not addressing the 17 or 18,000 septic systems that we've previously identified as challenging. But it was a step in the right direction, a big step. It was a philosophical step from this county, and the justification and the efforts that these folks did scientifically, I applaud your work. The other takeaway, and probably the one that's most important for this group, is that detailed research literally every 30 yards, because we originally targeted about 3,600 out of 18,000 septic tanks to remove. Probably they need to come out, but it looks like from what you've just found that we can be much more specific and effective with our monies that we have removing septic. So I look forward to that change in the plan, and based on the analysis that you all have done, I support it already. So thank you all.
Yes.
Yeah, you guys did a great job. You really did.
Thank you very much. All right, on to new business. Meeting frequency and proposed bylaws change. John.
Okay. I have a motion, you've seen it before, we kicked it right from the last meeting for time. If it passes, I will have a second. If it passes, I'll have a second motion. I move to amend the bylaws to state that the committee holds regular meetings at least every 2 months. The bylaws language to be modified as follows. It takes the word regular monthly meetings, takes the word monthly out, and changes that to regular meetings at least every 2 months. And if somebody wants to know what the reasons are, I'd be happy to state them, but I'd like to cover that in the second motion. If this passes, I seek a second.
Second.
I would like to hear all the reasons.
All right, Madam Chair. First of all, there's no requirement for monthly meetings. That is not something that's stated in the ordinance that creates us. Secondly, this motion would legitimize a practice we've adopted of occasionally canceling a meeting. And that's not allowed under the bylaws, and therefore it's not allowed under Robert's rules unless we adopt this amendment. The only way we can cancel a meeting is to schedule it and not have a quorum show up. And that's not fair to the public, it's not fair to the process it advertises and so on. Even a unanimous vote of this body can't go against the bylaws. And then the rest of this deals with my second motion. So I think it allows, what this does, it allows us to cancel a meeting occasionally, as I think we've done twice, and it would also allow us to shift to a more relaxed meeting schedule if that was the choice we made on my second motion.
John, I just have a question. The bylaws require that we meet every month?
Yeah.
It says the Oversight Committee holds regular monthly meetings.
Okay.
You can't hold a regular monthly meeting unless you have a meeting every month.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, it depends. I mean, what's the operational definition of regular? And if it's
Yeah.
not in there, then I think we have that flexibility already, John. It's all about the definition.
I think this is like chicken soup. It doesn't hurt, and it does allow us to, in a more leisurely fashion, drift to meetings every 2 months. There's reasons for us to go to meetings every couple months, and it has to do with individuals on this board who have a difficult time getting to regular monthly meetings.
Well, this is a volunteer position, so if that's a challenge, then one should not volunteer.
Roger Dodger, on the other hand, we've got some valuable members.
I don't argue that. I don't argue that point. We have some very valuable members. I've learned a lot, but if it's a huge challenge, I'm more worried about the challenge to staff than I am to us volunteers.
John, I think we should look at the motion, which is about the bylaws, and as John stated, it does put us more in line, again, as though Charles brought up a point about definition. This first one is just about what the bylaws say, and then after that, we can look at our agenda going forward, which may be the bigger issue.
Is there any further discussion? All right.
They-
Yes.
So the current bylaws read regular monthly meetings, or
Yes.
they read
They,
regular?
they
They
do,
read
that's
regular monthly
exactly,
meetings.
that's the way it currently reads. The Oversight Committee holds regular monthly meetings on dates it sets in coordination with blah, blah, blah. The change that is being proposed, and a motion has been made and seconded, to change the language to the Oversight Committee holds regular meetings at least every 2 months.
And couldn't you just state that holds regular meetings and not qualify it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
If that were an amendment and seconded and voted and approved.
Well, I'd like to amend this motion to read, the committee holds regular meetings without the, at least every 2 months.
Removing the word monthly. Is there a
Yes.
second for the amendment?
Second.
All right, is there any discussion on the amendment?
I have a question to council. Is this sufficiently detailed? If it said just hold regular meetings?
I think it says hold regular meetings on dates and set in coordination with natural resources, so that does give you the flexibility if you wanted to schedule it.
And there's no legal issue?
There's no legal issue,
Thank you.
other than I think you have improper motion. The party that made the motion needs to accept the amendment.
Which is you, right? You need to accept the amendment?
She's got the chair.
Well, we can either vote on the amendment, or John can accept the amendment and the second person can accept
Not
it.
under Robert's
I
rules,
accept.
was fairly common practice. I would accept the amendment, and whoever seconded my motion, if they'd accept
I
it.
accept the amendment.
All right, so
Hold regular monthly meetings, or hold regular meetings.
we are now, the motion on the floor is to change the language to the Oversight Committee holds regular meetings on dates it sets in coordination with the Natural Resources Management Director. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Then we will vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Great.
I've got a second motion that I've promised. I think what I'd like to do is withhold the motion and just offer the thoughts here and see if the chair and our den mother from county staff think this is a good idea and can move forward without a motion. And I will tell you, this comes from a lunch that I had with Virginia, where she said, you know, this would really be not a bad idea. We have the option now that this first motion's been approved, to go to meetings every other month. That would significantly cut staff prep time. It would significantly ease the burden on folks that have day jobs that are challenging. And I've also offered and we still can have special meetings per the bylaws. We can still hold meetings as Virginia says, even if it's just monthly. But she also suggested that there might be a schedule that you see here that offers themes to meetings we had every other month. If we did skip meetings on a regular basis, we would still expect to see the progress reports and the fiscal reports posted online on a monthly basis and emailed to us. I will withhold this motion if you think you got enough to work with here to propose a meeting schedule for next year that skips meetings as suits your burden and accommodates as you can the time challenge that members have. You good with this without a motion?
Well, I guess I just want to make sure that that's the desire of the committee.
I'd like to. I know I had a conversation with Virginia too. It wasn't over lunch, although I'm available 7 days a week, Virginia, especially if you're buying. But I do. I understand the burden of the meetings on staff. I appreciate the fact that regardless of John telling you to fill the final position. You still haven't filled the 5th position. John, maybe you and I can go to lunch and convince Virginia to that. But I understand that there's time involved, and I think if you're going to have to do the progress reports monthly and put those on the website, even if we got together to allow anything we've heard from the public and for an issue that we've heard to bring up, and then also for the community, the public to voice their concern every month, even if there isn't a formal presentation, I think that is invaluable, and I think that's something that would benefit not only us, but would benefit the community. It would also give us the leeway if there are issues with presenters like we've had that couldn't make the meeting. Maybe they fill in the meeting after, and there isn't much additional work since we've already done the work of reaching out to them.
Courtney?
As much as I think most people would admit or know that I would love to have less meetings, but I think the community is used to these now, and they're used to watching them, and they're used to coming. They want to be able to see us talk about these projects and get updated, and I don't know if that would send a good message to the community at this point in our work. So that would be my only concern. I definitely would love to have less meetings to go to, trust me, but I am concerned with what that would look like to the community if we reduced our meetings at this point in our projects.
Yeah. Hold on one second. I would like to speak to that as well, as the chair. And I agree exactly with what you're saying. I think that as we move forward, and we have 2 or 3 years under our belts of this committee and the money's coming in and the project's moving forward, that we could entertain going to a reduced schedule. Because at that point, we're still fact-finding, we're still getting information from a lot of these outside agencies that, again, may not be as much for us as it is for the community to hear and have access to and be able to know what that information is as well. And so I think as we begin to have those people come in and we've got some of that behind us, that we'll be in a position that we can look at fewer meetings. I do think, potentially maybe having 1 or 2 meetings, such as the December meeting, being eliminated, would not be a problem. But I agree that if we move to an every other month, that we may be sending the wrong message, and that there still is a lot of information that we need to glean and that the community needs to hear. Thank you.
If I could, super discussion, I would suggest the way to deal with this matter in real time is for the committee chair and the director of natural resources management in the county to keep this a viable discussion. I think we've heard the sense of the committee, and as I say, there's no motion before us. I suggest we end the discussion.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
We didn't have the whole sense of the committee. I want to throw my 2 cents in here. In terms of committee members' times being consumed by the meetings, that's totally out of my consideration. I don't care if it consumes your time. This is an important issue and we need to address it. If you can't come to the meetings, you have the opportunity to resign. There's a form sitting on our desk that allows for your reappointment. I'm most concerned about staff time.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that could help staff out a lot is if the COC members who don't always do their homework before coming to the meeting, it would be valuable if you reviewed all the information carefully that's provided for you. I think some of the questions that are asked here could be easily answered well in advance of the meeting without taking up so much time, so much staff time. And so I would prefer to allow the county staff to decide when it's important to have meetings, give them some flexibility. I understand the message it sends out to the public if we cancel meetings, that it could certainly be a big problem. But I think some of the discussions we have here go on, they're prolonged, because people haven't done their homework. So I would encourage for the new year, everybody make a resolution to review your packages of information that Carol sends out religiously each month carefully. And if you have questions about what's in the agenda, why not contact staff before the meeting and ask them if they can clear it up? If you need to bring it up to the whole committee, that's fine. But I think we spend too much time at these meetings talking about things that aren't very important. We spend a lot of time talking about things that are important. Let's focus on the important things and not the unimportant things. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Well, can I just say one thing? Because I agree the important things, but one of the things I've observed in these meetings, city council meetings, is that a lot of discussion that the public would like to hear doesn't take place on the oversight committee level. So sometimes there are questions that even if you've asked a staff person, they need to be talked about here as well, so that the public can understand what the reasoning is behind them, just to make that point, because that's been one of my frustrations. And I would hope that we would all be and keep our questions to those that are helpful to ourselves and the public, and not just for hearing ourselves talk.
Septic ordinance compliance grants.
Hey,
Virginia.
thank you. So the table in your packet is identical to what was in the county commission packet. The one that was distributed this morning has an extra little narrow table added in the middle. So if you could find the loose one rather than the one that was in the packet last week. So when the county commission was discussing the moratorium, the septic moratorium back in May, they asked how the moratorium and how a permanent ordinance that might follow was going to affect especially the low-income members of the community, and asked staff to think about if there was a way to offset that. And so what we proposed for the board's consideration was I met with the Director of Housing and Human Services and talked about the programs that already come through the county and the cities for low-income housing, and how we might partner with those existing programs to offset the increased cost of nitrogen-reducing septic systems as opposed to conventional septic. And so the top table, the left-hand area, low-income applicants, based on the number of low-income homeowners that qualify through the city and county programs currently for either home construction or home remodeling that might result in the need for a septic upgrade, a new septic or a septic upgrade. Identified an estimate of 30 participants. If the cost of a nitrogen-reducing septic system is about $4,000 more than a conventional system, the idea was for the first 2 years of this new ordinance, to provide that full $4,000 delta, but then provide that through a grant program, but then reduce that amount over the following years, so that when the half-cent sales tax sunsets, people are used to the full cost of these advanced systems. And so the grant amount would go down to $3,000 for 2 years, and then $2,000 for 2 years, and then $1,000. At the first public hearing for the permanent ordinance, the board discussed their interest in maybe providing that same level of assistance. If you're going to provide it for low-income homeowners, why don't you provide it for everyone? And so the top right table is if you extended the same grant program to everyone who was developing. So the 480 participants per year is based on the current rate of septic approvals by the Department of Health at the 800 a year. And then we did, with the help of applied ecology, we looked at how much vacant land in the county is within the septic overlay, would be subject to the new ordinance, and came up with an estimate of 480 parcels a year. And so if you offer them the same program, the price tag on that is approximately $9.6 million. In the second public hearing, the final public hearing for the septic ordinance, one commissioner brought up, well, there was discussion about whether they wanted any of the sales tax, the half-cent sales tax, to go towards new development. And so there was some discussion about putting grant funds towards retrofits, not new construction. So the middle table there is the row that says existing top priority septic upgrade program. That's what's in the plan right now. We identified what we thought were the top 1,387 sites where hookup to sewer was not feasible, so upgrading them in place, providing full cost for that, estimated at $16,000 apiece. And so what's in the plan to do that is $22,192. If the county commission wants to expand that program, and sorry, I skipped a very important piece.
We're lost. We lost that
Yeah.
chart. I've got this one. Where's the middle one we're talking about?
Right here.
You got it. Terry got it.
Okay.
Lost in the file.
So the county commission was debating this grant program, and they decided to ask you, the Save Our Lagoon Citizen Oversight Committee, for a recommendation. So that's why I'm bringing this to you. So in that discussion, they also talked about maybe expanding the grant program that's currently in the plan to provide some sort of cost share to more properties to retrofit more septic systems that are known to be the highest priority. So just as an example of what that might be, if we identified through the work that Anthony just described, the worst 1,500 additional parcels in addition to what's already in the plan, and provided a 50% cost share, which would be approximately $8,000 each, that would cost $12 million. So not that, you know, you could pick any number of sites, you could pick any amount of cost share. I'm just trying to get a feel for what you might recommend to staff to come back and work the numbers. When we will have Claudia's output in a couple weeks. So by your next meeting, we could identify where these sites are, what the nutrient load reduction would be from some, number of sites, so that we can do the cost-benefit analysis that you're used to, consistent with the rest of the plan.
Yes, Courtney.
So first, I just want to make sure we're taking off the new development off the table. I just want to make sure that's going to happen, because I don't think our committee should be using or recommending using lagoon tax to add septic tanks to the county. So that, I just want to make sure everybody knows my opinion on that one. But the issue of the upgrade, so we would be focusing on septic tank areas that we've determined are not appropriate for sewer hookup, correct? Like,
yes.
Whether it's soil conditions or
Distance,
size of lots, whatever. Okay.
Capacity at the plant.
Okay, good. So, well, let's talk about that, capacity at the plant. We probably, we need to discuss that, I think, with the utilities, because we don't want to spend tax money, lagoon restoration money, because the utility doesn't want to upgrade their plants. Yeah, I mean, I'm just being honest there. So if we could maybe leave that on the table, that discussion on the table. But if we're looking at areas that just aren't appropriate for logistical reasons, I would agree with paying for that upgrade. But I have a real problem with any new construction, I have a problem with doing this because the utility doesn't want to upgrade their plants. Because they need,
$50 million.
right, so they really need to start looking at their rates and their upgrades and things like that,
I have a question as well about this. Has there been any consideration to helping people that have septic systems and are close to an existing utility to be able to pay for the hookup to that existing utility?
So we've talked about that a lot, and we're working on language to include in the next plan update to allow you to do that.
Okay, because that, in many cases, that's the stumbling block. They're close, but it would be a similar cost or, to putting in a new septic system, and people are reluctant to do that. They'll just stick with what they've got rather than moving to the sewer connection that is available to them.
Right.
It's within a certain distance, and if we could determine what that distance is and what the amount that we would be willing to pay, I think that would be valuable as well.
Yeah, if sewer's available, they need to hook up to sewer. So that, if that's, that should definitely be a criteria for this. That if we wouldn't be paying for an upgrade to a septic system if sewer's available.
So
right?
The problem is the definition of available, right?
Okay.
Available has a very specific definition in the utilities world, and it is a gravity system at the right-of-way abutting your yard. So what Anthony's running into in the field is a homeowner that is 2 houses away from the gravity sewer. It's not abutting their yard, but they would be willing to run a pipe in the right-of-way to hook up to that sewer if there were some funding to assist.
Okay, so
There's another situation, which we have hundreds of people that fall into this category. They are adjacent to a force main, not a gravity sewer.
Right.
And so that is not by state definition available, but it's there and could be tapped into if funding were available and the homeowners were willing.
And that was the point I was trying to make. Yes, go ahead.
Are you finished? Yeah, and we are already doing that. I mean, in a number of the projects that we are funding, it's not a gravity, we're having to use force, we're extending, and we're already paying for that. I want to echo Courtney. I don't believe that we should use any of this tax money to subsidize any new development or septic systems of any standard into the county. However, as I look at the option of, we've only identified about 3,500 septics that we're going to take out, and that number is going to change based on the new stuff. We have 1,300 on here that we're paying 100% cost, and you're looking for a sense of committee, Virginia. That 1,500 more, I'd go with 100%. So we're talking a number of about $24 million, but we are raising over $100 million more in 10 years than we initially projected. And if there's anywhere to direct that additional $100 million over 10 years, it's to remove the septics, the worst septic systems that came into this county in the 60s and the 70s and that continue to contribute, I believe, according to your chart, somewhere in the 30% of nutrients into the lagoon. So to me, as we're looking at projects, that's where we should focus the money that we're fortunate to be bringing in.
Madam Chair.
Yes, John.
First of all, I want to say, as far as sense of committee, I agree absolutely with John. I agree absolutely with Courtney. It strikes me that there's really two things we're dealing with here. One is to figure out a bang for the buck figure of merit or algorithm inside what we think we should be funding, and we have the mechanism in place for that. It's cost per pound of nitrogen removed, and I think anything you bring to us that's couched in those terms inside the parameters that have been discussed here will be very welcome. There's a second element that's more in a direction of, if not policy, regulation, or what have you. It sounds like there are some useful new language that deals with what should be eligible sewer hookups and so on. And while we can't change state law, we can decide how we want to apply Lagoon Trust Fund money. And again, it's a bang for the buck thing. And if you have some thoughts on that, getting a house that's one house next to, or how do we deal with force mains, et cetera. Because there's two things in this. One is that 37% bar that says if we can fix septic systems, we have struck a huge blow for fixing the river. And the second is, if we had to pick one topic that's in the mind of the general public regarding the lagoon, it's poo-poo in the river. And this deals with that too.
Stephanie?
Yes.
I just want to add one thing on the septics, and what I don't believe we've really seen is an education program for the septics, because we know, this is over 10 years. In the immediate, there's some things that the public can be doing, and I don't know that it's widely understood. I mean, I was very surprised to learn, coming from a place that had sewer and 2 septic, that you should only do 1 load of clothes a day, when I was doing 7 loads in one day. So just very simple things that I'm hoping maybe someone will come forward, with some education that can be applied broadly to the public, and at least in the interim, help with that as well, with just a sliver of the problem.
So the committee recommended and the board approved adding an education component, an outreach component for septic. And we developed a request for proposals, advertised that, received the proposals. Yesterday was when the selection and negotiating committee met to review those. We received 3 proposals. Dr. Windsor was representing the COC on that committee. So we hope to have somebody on board very soon developing that outreach program as well as the other ones that are in the plan.
Wonderful.
So basically what we would like to do, or what, like as a summary, we're looking at focusing on retrofits in areas that you all prioritize, the staff will look at and prioritize, and then we would be defining or broadening the definition of availability to include those instances with the force main issues and the length of pipes and so on, and basically eliminating the idea of new development. So that's pretty much where we're going. Is that what I hear everybody talking about? Okay.
I think the one thing what John had said is if we could get a list of maybe additional septic tanks and see how that calculates to our pound per nitrogen. I think, as John said, that's been what we've relied on. And it would be interesting to see now that we saw, maybe not distance necessarily, but soil comparisons, how our pound or dollar per pound has gone up or down, and if we can improve it even higher, by getting more.
Yeah.
I would, if the committee had no objection, I would encourage Virginia and Courtney to have a good dialogue before the next meeting on this topic, so that your thoughts are incorporated to the extent she thinks is necessary. You certainly have my marker.
All right. Interlocal coordination meeting?
Yes. So like the last 2 years, we held a forum with the cities and the other jurisdictions to talk about how to apply for the next round of funding in the Lagoon Plan. You have an agenda there before you. I annotated that agenda. You had asked that we try to find out from the cities, get their feedback on what hurdles stand between them and proposing more projects and implementing projects faster. And so we asked those questions at this forum, and the red text in italics is the feedback that we received. So they wanted to know if they could combine multiple project types, and we said, absolutely, yes, treatment trains, that's great, work with us, we'll figure out how to do that with the applications. If we need to amend the applications for your specific combined project, we will do that. Can entities submit denitrification walls? Yes, we've already done one, the Long Point Park, so we would welcome those. Can entities submit for marina pump out? We thought that was a fantastic way to reduce the nutrients in the lagoon. However, we think that would be a great project for this new TDC grant program, and there's also the Clean Marinas state grant program, so we encouraged folks to look at those funding options as well as the Lagoon Trust Fund. Can entities submit feasibility studies? Not alone, right, because there's no nitrogen reduction benefit from a feasibility study, but the TDC program specifically has grants for up to $50,000 with no matching requirements for feasibility studies, so that's the best way, I think, the best tool to get those feasibility studies done. Can entities submit for maintenance costs? This was another one that I had to say no to and explain. The concept behind these funds are these projects, there has to be a long-term maintenance entity that is willing to keep these projects working. Otherwise, if they're addicted to funding from this program, when this funding goes away, that project's not going to be working anymore, and the lagoon's going to go back downhill. So the plan is not developed to cover maintenance costs. There was considerable discussion about stormwater projects receiving higher cost share, and I know that that's been a hot topic with this committee as well. I recently had Brandon juxtapose, I don't know if you have a way to pull that up, it's in the survey? Oh, yeah. So when we look at that, actually, Brandon, if you went to the septic presentation, we had the first slide without the bars. The dollars in the plan are roughly proportional to the loading coming from these different project types. Where that is not true is stormwater. The amount of stormwater dollars coming from the half-cent sales tax are relatively smaller than the loading that is coming from stormwater. The reason for that is because just like sewer already has utilities, stormwater already has utilities. The county and the municipalities have stormwater utilities. And so when you look at the total funds available from cities and the half-cent sales tax, there's quite a bit of funding out there for stormwater projects. Mm-hmm. So I know that's not the perfect answer, but I just wanted to share that with you, and we can talk about that more.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, if I can ask, that makes it tougher for low-income communities, right, which generate less stormwater funds?
If the entire city
yeah, if
was
you've got, 30% of your population below the poverty level, your stormwater fund generation isn't as high. Okay.
I just wanted to add, too, is that, the stormwater also has other funding source options, too. So like 319 grants, TMDL grants. So we're building a stormwater pond right now, and we paid maybe 85%, or that 85% of it is being paid for by other grants, and we didn't even apply for the lagoon tax because we didn't need to. So, there's other sources of funding for these types of projects. That's why we've always kind of kept that amount lower in the plan because of that. We don't have another funding source for muck dredging. We don't have another funding source for septic tank removal,
Right.
So
that's, Brandon's got it up now. So you see the bar chart of funding from the half-cent sales tax as well as from municipal, state, and county dollars for these different types of projects relative to the amount of nutrient input coming
so
from those different.
The light green is what the Save Our Lagoon Fund is paying for. And then the dark green is other county funds from the stormwater fees. And then the yellow is the municipalities' stormwater fees.
I can't see we have a problem with the allocation of trust fund dollars against stormwater as it's balanced right now. Somebody comes in turn their pocket inside out and says, we can fix it if you give us money, we have no other source, then maybe we want to listen to them. But for now, I think it's a very sound principle that we aren't in business to use the trust fund to help other funding entities balance their budgets.
agreed.
Okay, so the last input was just that, the municipalities need staff to move more projects forward. So,
I would argue that's a League of Cities conversation that needs to go on, and I don't know if we have any way to present that, but I think that would be a very, very good thing for a League of Cities to have a conversation on.
All right, Brandon, since you're already there.
Yeah. So we just released on Wednesday a survey to get feedback on the priorities for next year's update. And the University of Florida IFAS Extension has helped us to put that survey together. And we put it out on social media on Wednesday with the announcement for this meeting, and then yesterday did a dedicated announcement for it as well, and that is pinned to the top of our Facebook page, so it'll be the first thing anyone sees. And we'll be putting out 2 notices a week through that channel as well to try to promote people to give feedback. We've also shared this through the different communication people that I have in my list who are willing to share our posts, so I sent it out to them. And the NEP has also sent it out to their list of scientists and lagoon advocates. I've already gotten a request from a commissioner in Martin County to provide a print form because they didn't want to go through the online one, but they did want to see it. So it is getting out there and spread around. And when you click on that link, it will bring you up to the IFAS survey. So, and that's where we just pulled that chart from.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
yeah, so the survey asked questions, so, within types of projects that reduce incoming load, is the balance of funding right? Or should we redistribute within reduced types? And it goes through each of the different Rs and then asks, and between the Rs is the distribution of funding right? And then is there anything else that, we're leaving out?
And we do show them charts that have the current funding, as you'll see here, so they can see in all the reduced projects how much is spent on each of those types. And then we ask them, how should these funds be addressed and changed?
Do you see this, this is late in the game, do you see this having any major bearing on the plan we're about to look at December, January, or is this preparation for next year's plan and preparations for next year's survey?
So we have a 3-week deadline for people to fill out the survey. If they're going to fill out the survey, I think 3 weeks is enough.
Yeah.
And so in terms of doing some redistribution, that's still feasible at this point. We have a whole list of unfunded priorities in the plan as well. And so if we get some strong recommendations to shift things here or there, we can do that. If we get recommendations for totally out-of-the-box stuff that we haven't considered, that we don't have knowledge of and resources for, then, that's not going to make it in this plan update, but it'll give us a year to look into that further and prepare for the next one.
Good answer.
And the survey's open till November 9th.
So I like the idea of the survey, but I just want to make sure that if we're looking at it to shift priorities, that, that we also discuss the science behind that. Because I think there's, when you have, when I talk to residents and they think, the biggest problem is sewer discharges, and you've just looked at a graph where it's, a tiny minuscule compared to septic tanks and other things like that. So I just want to make sure that we keep a lot of that within the world of,
Yeah, we are sharing that information, giving them those graphs ahead of time so they can sort of see what the
It's
distribution is.
right there with the question.
Okay.
So
Yeah, my
can't
screen
look at
is
the
really
question
blurry
without
right here.
looking at the graph at the same time.
And we do ask, what the demographic is, whether they're an advocate, a scientist, general public, whatever. And so we'll be able to also suss out answers
There's a
based.
lot of scientists on Facebook right now.
Yeah.
Yes, I see I'm not a professional, but
Yes.
a lot.
Yes.
I also want to back up. By the way, I agree with you completely. I think it's a sense of opinion, and it may give us some ideas on education. I certainly talk to people who
Yeah.
think that we're spending billions of dollars on oysters and they want to stop all of it, et cetera. So I
Right.
think this is useful in that sense, but as
Agreed.
far as a decision-making tool, science is what we need to
Yeah.
work with. This just hit me, and I apologize on the dates. We moved our meeting forward to December 14th, which cut a week of staff's time. They've got a deadline for these proposals on November 5th. Are you going to be able to have it ready by the 14th for us?
Yes.
Okay. And then the next deadline, I think, is to go to the county on the 29th of January. And we meet just like a week before that. So we're just going to kind of review it, or are we going to get into the details on these things? Are we going to have time to read them? Or have we just crunched ourselves too much? And I know it's county budgeting and...
So we had 3 weeks of review time for the proposals for the committee. We had 2 weeks for staff to turn it around, and then 3 weeks for the committee. And so when you moved your meeting up a week, we reduced your time to 2 weeks. So we still have our 2 weeks, and you'll have 2 weeks. I think we're, nothing else changed in that. So it'll be a busy holiday season for all of us, but.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Brandon. All right, Virginia.
Okay, received a number of questions over the life of the plan so far about expectations of, what should we expect to see? How do we know that we're succeeding? What does progress look like? And so we worked with Marcy Frick at Tetra Tech to develop this table of outputs, right, what we're actually funding, and then what are the outcomes that we would expect from those outputs over different time frames. So, in the first 5 years versus the second 5 years versus long term. And then across the different rows, it's sort of, by project type, and some of those projects roll up together to generate cleaner groundwater or cleaner surface water, and then those work together to have cleaner lagoon water, which will in turn lead to seagrass and higher productivity of critters that rely on that seagrass. So our intent was to incorporate something like this into the next update of the plan, and I just wanted you to see it, and if you have any feedback, it's the ink's not dry yet. So.
Is this I believe this is the first time that we've put a timeline on a cleaner lagoon. I see, in outcomes years 6 to 10, we have cleaner lagoon water, and then from 10 plus, it's lush seagrass beds. I like seeing that. That's, next to the citizen scientist on Facebook telling me, what we need to do, then I think the number 2 question I get is, when are we going to see results? So I think that's very important, and I do think it's accurate. I like to think that I hear Dr. DeVries mention 6 to 8 years all the time when he talks about other estuary programs and when they start to see substantive change. So I'm a big fan of seeing that written. Hopefully we'll be right.
Yes, so.
I think this is an extraordinarily valuable page. It needs to go in the plan. If there are any members of the working press sitting in the back row, I hope they paid attention to it. Hi, Joe.
All right, well, the last thing on the agenda is committee reappointments. So having reviewed the ordinance that established the committee, and put that language in your packet, sort of excerpts from the ordinance. The reappointment process is going to be a bit lengthy, so that's why we're starting so early. Your terms are up in February. But for those that were appointed by the League of Cities, or recommended by the League of Cities, we need to first get from you whether you want your to be renewed. Then we need to go to the League of Cities with those renewals, then to the County Commission with those renewals, and then any seats that are vacant or not renewed, we'll need to ask the League of Cities and the County Commission if they want to reshuffle folks that are on the committee, moving alternates up into member seats, whether they want to go back to the pool of original applicants, or whether they want us to re-advertise and open the doors to new folks. So all of that process is going to take a number of months, plus the Lagoon Plan update, plus the holidays. So we're starting now, asking you to make a decision as soon as possible about your renewal, and then we'll start that process of approvals.
Thank you.
This isn't a form for us to fill out.
Yes, it is.
Oh.
So who do you want us to give it to?
Carol.
Carol? Okay. Got it.
All right. General public comment. I know that Mr. Rosenfield had to leave. Mitchell Roffer? Right the first time.
Thank you. This is my first chance to be able to come up to this Citizens Committee. I've been in travel, and I plan on being here more often. I have some comments and some items that came up quickly during today and didn't have a full chance to review the full packet. One of the red flags that came up to me today was the comment about the increased cost of muck removal for the future. And one of the major things on the plan, I recall, was the cost-benefit analysis and removing nitrogen by pound. If this number is going to greatly change in the next 6 months or a year, I think that whole program needs to be reevaluated, because the big push on removing muck from the lagoon came from the amount of dollars per pound removal, and it was most efficient to do that. So I don't know if money needs to be spent elsewhere, but I think that needs to be renewed again. Regarding the applied ecology analysis, I overheard quickly that the model failed or it broke down when the numbers came so high. So that raises a red flag to me. Did we lose resolution in looking at this problem because we had to have a modeling or statistical reduction because the model didn't work? I also like the comments that the idea of permitting any septic in the future. I support the idea that we're not supporting new septic in the county, and particularly these so-called high-efficiency septics. To me, if any nitrogen is being leaked into the lagoon system from septic, it should be eliminated. The comments about needing more public meetings, I know I haven't been here and haven't watched on TV, but I've certainly communicated with people on the board about this. The public is crying out loud. What are you doing? What's happening? What is success going to look like? People comment to me almost every day, oh, it's a failure, it's a failure. We're throwing all this money away, where's it going? It's being robbed, and to me, that's just a matter of communication. And the more public meetings that you have, I think the better. Monthly meetings should be in stone. I appreciated also the comments on, again, new septic and upgrading the water treatment system in particular. You'll hear more from me publicly about that, in addition to the op-ed that we wrote a couple of weeks ago about improving the water treatment facilities in the county. And then finally, I appreciated the comments on making municipalities responsible for funding projects and their responsibilities to fix the lagoon too, not relying on the trust fund. We don't want people relying on the trust fund. Municipalities have to spend the money to fix the lagoon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I think it'd be useful, Mitch, if you stated your bona fides. Because this is a fellow we should be listening to.
I'm a PhD from University of Miami in marine biology and fisheries oceanography. I've been active in environmental protection advocacy my whole career, from working with the Nassau County Department of Health, dealing with these issues, with estuarine issues and eutrophication and nitrogen pollution my whole career. So while most people know me as a fish guy, I've been involved in environmental protection, water and wastewater treatment my whole career. And of course, I live in Melbourne Beach, and on one side of my house is the lagoon, the other side is the ocean. And I came up from Miami to get a better life up here and no traffic and better natural resources and clean water and clean air. And while in the beginning, the first 10 years, it was great, but recently that seems to be declining, and I'm greatly concerned, and I'm going to be more active on this publicly and privately as best as I can to help you and help the county and other people to improve the conditions in the lagoon and our environment.
Thank you.
And I just want to say welcome, Mitch. I'm glad to see you back in the country and back involved. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Sandra Sullivan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to bring to your attention an issue, I don't know if you're aware, I'm sure you are, about the PFAS that is been found in the lagoon, and perhaps this needs to be taken into account in the Save the Lagoon plan. It goes beyond the PFAS. What was identified is that there are other contaminants that have entered the waterways from the military establishments, for example, Patrick Air Force Base and Cape Canaveral. I'm from South Patrick Shores, and I recently approached the county about getting the canals tested to the west of us because there's an old military dump under our property. I have a deep well that's in the artesian level, and apparently lead and radium and PFAS has been found down in the artesian. But the point is, these contaminants are going into the lagoon. The PFAS maybe act like a tracer to know where these chemicals have gone. And I think it's imperative that we do much more monitoring, maybe look at increasing that to find out the extent of where these plumes have gone, and then start having the scientific community look at how we can clean these up. Lead is a particular concern to me. Thank you.
Thank you. That ends public comment. Final comments by the committee.
I did have a comment, John, I saw too. I know there was the comment from the intergovernmental coordination meeting about entities needing more staff. And just one thing that I've tried to stress, and I think others have as well, that I think that this whole process is better done in collaboration with others, and I really would encourage the commercial, companies in our community, in our county, to start thinking about stuff like this and projects and approaching municipalities. And I don't want this to be a gold rush, and I think the board up here, our job is to vet those projects as they come in. But I think once the companies start looking and offering, for lack of a better word, greener solutions and greener services, I think that rolls in. And I think a lot of people in this community are would purchase services from companies that offer things, and this might be a good opportunity for them to get a chance to build up that department in their company of doing these projects that they could still collect money on after the trust fund ends, to build a business plan now.
Courtney?
I just wanted to echo that, and I think also when we're looking at the staffing issue, I just want the community to understand the impacts of Amendment 1 that's going to be coming up, and the impacts on not only the county, but the cities, and then also the water management districts. And I think I got that number from Mark Ryan, was our water management district here is an $18 million, statewide, $18 million impact. And we're looking at trying to do water quality projects, and some of the people that are responsible are getting hit by these tax decreases. So I just want to make sure that people understand when we have these crises, and we are in a statewide water quality crisis right now. When we go to the voting booth, that's where the rubber hits the road. So I think just really educate yourselves on those impacts. The cities are able to raise our millage rates, but the county can't. They have a charter cap in revenue, and they're going to be looking at devastating cuts coming up, just devastating. So I think that's a big issue for us coming up.
Come on up.
Yes, good. It's my first meeting. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Sort of lost what I was going to say. But related to these contaminants, there has been an EPA investigation reopened up. It was from 1991, 1992, and that is now being relooked at as a possible looking up. I mean, it is a very serious concern. It is well documented within the EPA, the impact of old munitions sitting in the ground and the contaminants. And as well, I wanted to mention that I recently attended the RAB meeting from the military. And in their reports, they talk about the contaminants and the pathway through. We know sandy soil goes much faster to the Banana River. And they didn't investigate the extent of where those plumes have gone. So we know there's very good likeliness of these contaminations being in the lagoon, and I don't think it's something that I've seen in the lagoon testing for things like the heavy metals and petroleum products, and PCBs were identified also among a lot of other different chemicals. So I strongly hope that you will look into this in doing more monitoring. One other thing. I'm being on that South Patrick Shores and that plant being near capacity. I also wanted to mention that we can be creative and look outside the box and reducing like the 28 million gallons of sewage. It's frustrating to citizens when you talk about taking muck out, when you're putting so much muck in. And there's a pipe that goes past our community down to Old Base Housing, and I've talked to the county about tying in South Patrick Shores into that to offload that plant, because it's not if there's going to be another dump, it's when there's going to be another dump. But we don't seem to be making much headway on that. So it's something else maybe in your conversations with the county as a part of the committee, although not your responsibility, but still ties into how do you reduce that big impact of nutrients into the lagoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make sure that the community knows that we've had discussions with all the utilities here in these meetings in the past, so you can go back to the website and look at the previous meetings, and you can see all those discussions. So that they've come to present to us at least twice. We've had even municipal utilities come in, and we've discussed those options with all the utilities in past meetings.
Yes, John.
3 quickies. First, on red tide, Dr. Aaron Adams, who lives in Melbourne Beach, was a co-author with Dr. Roffer on a recent op-ed in Florida Today, is up on today's op-ed page in the Orlando Sentinel with a very good discussion of red tide. I would lead you to it. Basically, it gets down once again to nutrients and to how Florida doesn't know how to handle water. The second thing, City of Cocoa Beach a week ago held a workshop of the planning board, which I chair, its Sustainability Committee, which committee member Todd Swingle chairs, and the Land Management Committee, which deals with Thousand Islands and Cocoa Beach, on the topic of living shoreline. Orson Tarver was the guy that teed it up off the planning board. We had the zoo in talking about oysters. We had MRC in talking about living shoreline. We had Ms. Hart from the county talking about the county's role in this. The tape is available online. And as I said at that meeting, and by the way, the mayor and 2 of the 4 city commissioners attended. They were very interested in this. And as I said then, it maintains Cocoa Beach's standing in its competition with Satellite Beach to be premier of the 38 cities bordering the river and trying to do things for the river.
Almost there, not quite.
All right. And the last thing, I've mentioned a couple times, what I see is the need for an interdepartmental working group on county staff to coordinate lagoon work. I just crawled through, there are, under the departmental list, the county, 28 listed departments. By my crude count, 18 of them deal with something that has to do or affects the lagoon. And intention on this is not just to proselytize for it, and certainly not to put the burden on Virginia to carry this ball to the whole county staff. What I intend to do before the next meeting is do a little drafting of a paragraph that might get inserted into the lagoon plan for next month or for next year, and whatever Virginia does with it, she does, and whatever comes to us, we'll deal with. But I think the way to get a interdepartmental working group to coordinate lagoon matters within county staff is to have the county commission tell the county staff they're supposed to do it. And the place to do that is in next year's approval of the lagoon project plan, FYI.
Hey, I just wanted to say that COPO 2 is a sustainability advisory committee that will have a draft in March, final plan in May. We hope that we'll have budget implications that complement the lagoon plan as well. So this is a movement taking place across the Space Coast.
All right.
Our solar on City Hall is working right now, so.
Yay. All right. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate your input.
Thank you.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.